The wagon came at dusk, its wheels groaning against the dry earth, its canvas top sagging like a weary chest. The town had been waiting. Men stood with hands in pockets, spurs jangling against the boards, their faces half hidden beneath hats pulled low. The air carried that brittle silence that comes before a storm, though the sky was dry, the clouds far away. Out of the wagon stepped women, thin-shouldered, hollow-eyed, clutching at dresses that had once been white but had long since surrendered to dust. They looked neither left nor right, for each knew what those stares meant. A future measured not by affection, but by a man's coin purse, his need for labor, or his loneliness. And then came her, Eleanor Whitfield. Folks would call her Nora soon enough, though not with fondness. She was young, no more than 20, but there was something in her posture, something in the way she held her shawl closed at her throat, that marked her as different. Pride or defiance, whatever it was, it drew eyes. The men nudged each other, whispering. The women watching from doorways pursed their lips, already deciding what sort of trouble this girl would bring. Widow Kellogg, sharp as a crow and dressed in her eternal black, called the names, her voice ringing against the storefronts. One by one, brides were matched, hands exchanged, coins clinked. Each woman was led away, her eyes lowered, her fate sealed. When Nora's name was called, the crowd leaned forward. From the back stepped a man whose presence alone shifted the air. Thomas Grady. He was large, not the kind of largeness that came from strength, but from indulgence. Flesh spilling against his vest, a red flush spreading across cheeks already slick with sweat. He walked heavy, each step making the boards complain beneath him. His eyes, small, greedy, and uncertain, settled on Nora. A hush passed. He made his bid. High, higher than the others. The townsfolk chuckled under their breath, some out of cruelty, others out of surprise. A few women exchanged glances that said, "Poor girl." Widow Kellogg struck her cane against the boards. Sold. It should have ended there, the way it always did. The bride stepping down, the man leading her away. But Nora did not move. Her shawl tightened at her throat. Her face, pale and framed with strands of wind-blown hair, lifted toward the crowd. And then she spoke. "I will not go with him." The words dropped like stones into a still pond. The silence that followed was deafening. A few men barked out laughter, sharp and mean. A woman gasped. Widow Kellogg blinked once, twice, then hissed, "Girl, you've no say in it." But Nora stood her ground, her voice clear though her hands shook. "I would sooner starve in the street than take his name." All at once, the moment turned savage. Laughter erupted from the saloon doorway. "Hear that, Grady? Even bought you ain't wanted," someone jeered. Thomas's face went scarlet, sweat gleaming on his temple. He looked at Nora, then at the crowd, his humiliation laid bare for every eye to see. His fists balled, his mouth opened, but no words came. And when the laughter rose again, he spun on his heel and shoved his way back into the saloon, the boards creaking under his anger. The air was different now, ugly, charged. Nora remained where she stood, the townsfolk regarding her not with admiration, but with something colder. She had broken the script, denied the bargain, and in doing so, she had shamed one of their own. Widow Kellogg's lips thinned to a razor line. "Fool girl, pride makes a poor bedfellow. You'll see soon enough." And just like that, Nora was left standing alone as the other brides were led away, claimed, carried off to kitchens and fields and lonely cabins. That night, when lamps glowed in the windows and supper smoke curled into sky, she walked the dirt streets with nowhere to go. Men stared, some with curiosity, others with scorn. A mother pulled her child inside as Nora passed. The saloon doors swung open, laughter spilling out, Thomas's name tossed among the jeers. She pulled her shawl tighter, her shoulders stiff, her steps slower with each block. By the churchyard, she stopped, her breath fogging in the cool air. Alone, the choice that had been hers now tasted like ashes. And yet, her chin lifted still, as though she could not let the town see the crack forming in her. From across the street, unseen by most, a horseman had arrived that evening. He stood in the shadows near the livery, dust still clinging to his coat, the brim of his hat shadowing a face worn by miles. Caleb Grady, Thomas's younger brother. He had heard the tale already, carried on the breath of whiskey-soaked men. They told it with laughter, with jabs and mockery. He listened in silence, eyes narrowing but mouth never opening. Now, as he leaned against the post, he watched the girl who had brought such humiliation to his brother. Watched her walk like someone carrying chains no one else could see. Her figure moved against the lamplight, fragile and defiant all at once. Some souls are drawn to broken things, not to mend them, but to guard them from being broken further. And in that moment, Caleb knew her face would not leave him. The church bell tolled once, heavy in the night air. The town settled into its darkness. And Nora, refusing to bend even as loneliness bit sharp, stepped into the shadows alone. Morning came thin and gray, and with it the slow ache of hunger. The town had risen early, as it always did. Men to their stock, women to their washboards, children scurrying barefoot through dust. But Nora walked apart from them, her shawl tight, her eyes downcast. When she knocked at the doors of respectable houses asking for work, she was met with pursed lips and polite refusals that cut sharper than outright cruelty. "We've no need for extra hands," one woman murmured, closing her door before Nora could reply. At the laundry, she was told she might try elsewhere. At the saloon, a man leaned too close, suggesting work of a different kind. She left with her cheeks burning, her pride intact but her stomach empty. By nightfall, she curled against the rough boards of the church shed, the prairie wind slithering through cracks. Sleep came fitful, full of dreams of wide fields and voices she could never reach. When she woke, the hunger was worse. And yet, on the steps of the church, a half loaf of bread rested, wrapped in cloth. No note, just the bread, still warm. She glanced around the empty street, suspicious, but took it. Pride could not fill a belly. She ate slowly, each bite heavy with gratitude she refused to admit. The next evening it was a shawl, neatly folded on the same step. Then a bucket, filled with fresh water when her arms were too weak to draw it herself. Always anonymous, always quiet. For days she told herself it was Widow Kellogg, softening with pity, or the sheriff, silent and watchful. But when she lifted her eyes across the street, she often found the same figure lingering. Caleb Grady, leaning against a hitching post, rolling a cigarette he did not smoke, or brushing down his horse longer than the task required. He never approached, never demanded thanks, only nodded once if their eyes met. She wanted to hate him. He bore the name of the man she had humiliated, the man who cursed her name in the saloon, who called her spoiled and proud. But Caleb's eyes did not carry that same hunger, that same resentment. They carried something else, something unreadable, something steadier than pity. Still, the town would not forgive. They whisper when she passed, their words like birds in the wind. She thinks she's better than us. She'll starve before winter's through. And yet, each day she endured. She scrubbed her face with cold water from the well, smoothed her hair with shaking fingers, and walked the street with her spine straight, as though dignity could be a shield. One evening she found herself at the stable, staring at the horse she could not name. Her hands rested uselessly against the rail. Caleb appeared from the shadows, silent as ever, holding an apple. "Won't bite if you hold your palm flat," he said at last, his voice low, almost uncertain. "Same with life. Sometimes." She glanced at him, wary, but took the apple. The horse's teeth grazed her skin gentle, and the fruit was gone. A tiny moment, but it settled in her chest like a coal that would not go out. Days later, at the well, she was struggling with the rope, her arms trembling from exhaustion. Caleb came up behind her, not close, not intruding, just enough to take the rope and pull a hand over hand, the muscles in his forearms shifting with quiet strength. He filled the bucket and set it down by her feet. "I only wanted a choice," she blurted, surprising herself. Caleb looked at her, the bucket between them. His eyes were the color of worn leather, steady and unhurried. "Choice is a rare thing out here," he said. "You took yours. That's worth something." For a long moment neither moved. Then he tipped his hat and walked away, leaving her staring at the ripples in the water. It was not love, not yet. Love was too loud a word. It was something quieter, like the faint green of shoots pushing through hard ground. Nora began to notice the shift in herself. The first time she walked past the mercantile, without lowering her gaze, the way her steps grew firmer, her back straighter, the way she no longer flinched when voices carried her name. Caleb noticed, too. He never said it, but he saw her courage in small things. The way she stitched a torn hem with careful fingers, or the way she offered bread to a stray dog though she had little herself. Then came the storm. The sky split open one night with a crack of lightning that lit the town white as bone. Rain hammered the boards, sluicing down rooftops, turning dust to rivers of mud. Nor as she had grown under the weight of water, the roof leaking in fat, cold drops. She pressed herself into a corner, shivering, her shawl soaked through. A knock rattled the door. She froze, certain it was Thomas, come to sneer or worse. But when the door opened, it was Caleb. Rain slicked his coat, his hat brim dripping. He did not step inside. He only held out his coat, heavy and dry-lined. For a moment she hesitated, pride wrestling with need. Then she reached out, fingers trembling, and took it. Their eyes met in a flash of lightning, hers wide as steady, both silent. No words, just that coat, that gaze, that storm raging outside, while a quieter storm built between them. She wrapped herself in his warmth, and though he turned away into the rain, she knew something had shifted. Not a promise, not a claim, but a thread, fine and unseen, had tied itself between them. And threads, once tied, seldom let go. The storm left behind a town washed raw, the streets rutted with water and silence. For days afterward, the air carried the sharp scent of wet earth, and yet tension brewed thicker than any summer cloud. Thomas Grady had not forgotten. Each night in the saloon, his name burned on men's tongues. They laughed at him. Too fat, too weak, his pride stripped bare by the refusal of a slip of a girl. He drank deeper, his words slurring, his anger ripening into something darker. When whispers reached him that his brother had been seen near her, that Caleb's coat now rested on Nora's shoulders, Thomas's rage boiled over. Blood had betrayed blood. It began with words spat in the street. Thomas cornered Caleb outside the mercantile, his cheeks blotched red, his breath hot with whiskey. "She was mine," he hissed, fat fingers jabbing into Caleb's chest. "Mine by right. And you, my own brother, slinking in shadows, stealing what's mine." Caleb did not flinch. His voice was low, calm, but iron beneath it. "A woman ain't cattle, Thomas. She was never yours." The townsfolk watched from porches and windows. No one stepped between. They only waited, breath caught, as men often do when shame promises to spill into violence. But Thomas stormed off, muttering, his pride a festering wound. The confrontation had not ended. It had only been delayed. That night it found Nora. She was walking by the churchyard when he loomed from the shadows, his bulk blotting out the lamplight. His hand shot out, catching her wrist, squeezing until her bones ached. "You'll pay for what you've done," he snarled, spit shining on his lips. "Ruin my name, mock me before every damn fool in this town." She struggled, her shawl slipping, fear rising sharp in her throat. "Let me go." But Thomas's grip only tightened. For a breathless moment, it seemed the darkness itself leaned in, waiting to see if she would break. Then a voice cut through. "Enough." Caleb stood a few paces away, his silhouette framed by the pale moon. His hand hovered near the pistol at his hip, though he had not drawn it. His eyes locked on his brother's, steady as stone. "Let her go, Thomas." Thomas hesitated. Then, with a shove, he released her. She stumbled back, clutching her wrist. Caleb did not move toward her. His gaze never left his brother. "This ain't finished." Thomas spat, retreating into the night, his shadow dragging like a wounded animal. The town held its breath after that. Men muttered of a reckoning. Women whispered of brothers bound for ruin. And Nora lay awake each night, heart pounding, knowing this could not go on forever. At dawn one morning, Caleb saddled his horse and rode out toward the Grady ranch. The land stretched wide around him, the prairie pale under the rising sun. He rode not fast but steady, as if every hoofbeat carried the weight of choice. When he reached the corral, Thomas was already there, shotgun in hand. His bulk seemed large in the morning light, his face blotched and swollen from drink, but his eyes sharp with hate. "So it's come to this," Thomas said, his voice cracking the stillness. "It was always coming," Caleb replied, dismounting, his boots sinking into the dust. He carried no rifle, no pistol drawn, only his own calm. The two brothers face each other, the space between them heavy with years unspoken. "You think you're better than me," Thomas sneered, thin as a rail, drifting from town to town. "You think because she looks your way you want something." His hands shook against the shotgun stock. Caleb's voice was quiet, but it carried. "This ain't about winning. This is about letting go of what was never yours." The standoff stretched, silence louder than gunfire. The cattle shifted nervously in the pen, hooves scraping, as though even beasts could feel the weight of the moment. For a breathless instant, it seemed Thomas would fire. His finger twitched. Caleb stood unflinching, eyes steady, waiting not for the blast, but for the choice. And then, hoofbeats. Sheriff Eli McCord rode up slow, his badge catching the morning light. He dismounted, hand resting on his holster, gaze fixed on Thomas. "Put it down, Grady," the sheriff said. "Don't make your shame heavier than it already is." Thomas's chest heaved. His gaze flicked from Caleb to the sheriff, then back again. Finally, with a strangled growl, he lowered the shotgun. It slipped from his hands, clattering against the dirt. The fight was over, not with blood, but with a breaking. Thomas turned away, shoulders sagging, a man crumbling under the weight of his own pride. The sheriff gathered the gun. Caleb did not move until his brother was gone from sight, swallowed by his own silence. When Caleb returned to town, Nora was waiting by the well. Her shawl fluttered in the breeze, her eyes searching his face as he approached. For a long moment they stood in the dust, the town around them hushed. He removed his hat, holding it in his hands, his voice quiet. "I ain't here to claim you. I'm here to stand with you, if you'll have me." The words were plain, but they carried the weight of every silence, every gesture, every coat offered in the rain. Nora's breath caught, her heart trembling against her ribs. Slowly, she lifted her hand, resting it in his. Not forced, not bought, chosen. The town watched, some in judgment, some in wonder, but their eyes no longer mattered. For the first time since her arrival, Nora's choice was her own.